Hello everyone, it's Martin speaking. We are going to start in a few minutes. I'm just going to give a bit of time for everyone to arrive. I started the stream earlier on, half an hour ago, and I actually decided to stop it because otherwise the whole thing will be recorded as one and you will have half an hour empty video on YouTube, which I didn't want. So I'm still testing this live stream out. So my apologies if it's slow or if it's not working the way you want it. But I prepared a lot of interesting examples for you for today. And our topic is going to be typography with Adobe Illustrator. So hopefully you will enjoy this and there will be interesting examples and interesting techniques that you can learn. And to make it easier today, of course, like last time, everything that I do is recorded. So if you missed anything, you will be able to watch the recorded version of this whole stream. So it will be available on my YouTube channel, which if you haven't signed up yet, make sure you subscribe and then you will get notified whenever I do live streams or also whenever I upload videos, which I'm planning to do more regularly. So there should be 1 or 2 every week. In different topics, but essentially we'll be focusing on Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop, and anything to do with creating things and generally creative methods. So it will be available, the whole thing. So if you ever miss something or if I ever go too fast, you don't have to ask in the chat. You can just check the recorded version once it's finished and it's uploaded when I end the session. Also, to make things a little bit easier, I decided that I will have someone helping me out with the chat because otherwise I won't be able to pay attention to the techniques I'm showing you today. So to make it a bit more nicely, have a nice pace of the whole recording or stream, I want to make sure that I'm not distracted by the chat, but at the same time, if you have questions, I want those questions to be answered. So I asked my lovely wife, and she's going to help me out. She's also a graphic designer, creative professional, so she can help with most of the questions, I'm sure. If she's not going to be able to answer something, she's going to remind me at the end of the session, or whenever I look at the chat, she's going to repeat those important questions or useful questions that might be useful for everyone else to hear the answers for. So I just going to have a look at the chat. I can see some people are already here, and welcome everyone, whoever is watching me already live. So I'm just looking at the chat. If you want to say hi, you can now. You can do now. Hopefully the sound quality and the screen quality is good. I'm going to switch soon to my screen, but I just test it out now. So if I switch to my screen, you should be able to see what I'm doing there. So if I select something and move it around, you should be able to already see this. So just want to check whether everything is working, the screen and the voice. If someone can just reply in the comment whether you can hear me and you can see my screen, then I will be ready to start. Okay, good, perfect. Thank you very much. Brilliant. One last thing I want to mention, and this is something that I'm trying out today for the first time, and if it's successful and you guys like it, let me just switch back to my screen or turn my screen on as well for a bit. So if you guys like this, we can do this in the following streams as well. You probably know that I have a lot of online design courses as well, which you can find in the description, the link for my courses. And these are paid courses, but what I'm planning to do today is, because this stream is free, I'm planning to give away 1 or 2 or maybe 3 free courses. So make sure you pay attention to what I'm showing to you today, because based on the techniques and maybe shortcuts that I'm showing, I'm going to ask you one question at the end, and whoever is the fastest to reply, or maybe the first 2 or 3 answers, will be rewarded with free access to one of my courses. So make sure you pay attention. And I'm sorry for those who are not here on the live stream, because obviously you won't be able reply in a live chat, but it's a good reminder for you to make sure you join next time and be here on the live stream. So cool. Once again, hello everyone, for those who are joining me live, and thanks a lot for the comments in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to ask straight away. I will try to respond to everything, or if it's not me, Shumi, my wife, is going to try to reply to you, who's also a creative professional. Cool, I can see some of you are already here, so let's get started. So I'm going to minimize myself. I'm less important to be visible all the time, but hopefully you can see everything on my screen. And the first technique that I would like to show you is something that was introduced in Illustrator CS6, I think. So you don't necessarily need to have the latest version for this to work, but in case you do, I will also show you a different method to get the same result. So most of the time when you work with type, one limitation that you have is that you can't rotate or scale individual letters. Well, scaling is possible, but it's not as easy because you might need to also use other techniques. So let me just show you what I mean. So if you have, for example, a letter that you want to make bigger, let's say the T, you can use a shortcut, and here's a useful shortcut already, to increase the size of text. What you should use is Command Shift full stop or Control Shift full stop, and the same Control Shift or Command Shift comma can reduce the size. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down this combo of shortcuts, and that way I can increase or decrease the size of the selected type. Now, you can remember this shortcut better if you look at these keys. The full stop and the comma are actually the greater than and the less than signs. So that's easier to remember. So one of them increases, the other one decreases the size of selected text. Now, that's something you can do. And then what you can also do is to click between two letters like the T and the O, and then use Alt, left and right arrows. And as you can see, we can get them closer to each other or further away from each other. So that's again Alt or Option, left and right arrows. This is called kerning. And kerning is very important, especially when you work with titles or headings, because it's important how you balance the space horizontally between characters. So most type works well when you use lowercase characters, but with uppercase characters it starts to be a little bit tricky. So here immediately it looks better with a bigger T, the O to be closer. So the next one that I wanted to show you is that if I select this T and let's say I want to bring it down a bit, that's another shortcut worth remembering. It's Alt Shift or Option Shift up and down arrows. Now what that does is called baseline shift. Baseline shift is going to bring the selected text up or down. And what is this baseline? Well, the baseline is a term we use in typography. If I turn on my rulers, that's Command or Control R, and then drag one guide down from the top ruler, that way I could create this horizontal guide. So once again, click and drag from a ruler can add guides onto your artboard. That applies to all Adobe applications, by the way. So you see that very bright line here at the bottom. I just selected it and then it becomes a little bit more visible. That is your baseline. So whenever you type something, there will be a baseline on which all the characters will be sitting. Now, of course, depending on the font you use, there might be slight overlaps. So some things might go slightly or even further below the baseline. So in case you use all capitals, the only thing that might go underneath are letters like C and O, and maybe even U. Anything that has a curved bottom area that might go slightly underneath. So if I zoom closer, you can see the H and the T is sitting nicely on the baseline by the C and the U and the O as well, because they have that round bottom part. They go beyond the baseline. That's just something that by default fonts usually are set up with. But there's another term worth remembering. If I put some text in here and I place this, let me just make this smaller. This is a fast and quick way of making text smaller as well. If you hold down the Shift key and drag one of the corners of the whole selection, that immediately increases or decreases the size without distorting the text. So the Shift key was necessary not to distort the text. But now if I put this down here on the baseline, you will notice that we have also the P, which is called a descender. So it descends or goes underneath the baseline. And that's again just a term in typography worth remembering. All right, so obviously there's a lot of other terms, and I might do another live stream where I go a little bit further into this and I can teach you more about typography in general. But instead of boring you with terms, I know these are useful as well, of course, but instead of spending time on these, let's come back to our example and let's explore this feature called Touch Type, because apart from what I showed you, the baseline shift, the individual resizing and kerning of characters, there's a better way or faster way of scaling and even rotating individual characters without losing editability on them. And that's the key. Remember that. You want to work non-destructively, which means you don't lose editability on the text. So how do we do that? Very simple. There is a tool here in the toolbar. So you will find the touch type at the bottom of this little list here. Well, it's quite a big list, to be honest. There's several different ways of using the type tool, and these are all specialized ways of using it. And there's a default shortcut, Shift T. Now, I'm sorry if you don't have this in your version of Illustrator. I'm using CC 2017. I think this was introduced in CS6. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys can say it in the chat. If anyone is on CS6, let's see if you have touch type tool available. If you check it out quickly, that would be useful for everyone to know. Unfortunately, if you don't see that, then this technique you won't be able to use, but I still show it because if you have Creative Cloud or you're planning to upgrade, you will be able to use it. So when I select this tool, I can select individual characters in my still editable word or text. And once I select something, I can use these couple of things, like I can increase the size very quickly and easily. As you can see, that's similar to using the shortcut or simply changing the font size here on the top. But here comes the cool thing. I can now start dragging this font around, and what is happening is at the same time I'm moving it, I can move it left and right, which is like kerning, but I can also move it up and down, which is like baseline shift. So it's like baseline shift and kerning at the same time, and I can see exactly where that character goes. But here comes the best thing that you can't do any other ways just with this tool, and that's rotation. So let me just zoom slightly closer. Hopefully this zoom also works and you can see what I'm doing. So notice that little circle above my selection. If I click and drag, that's how I can rotate the currently selected character. So with that, I can move this anywhere I want. And you can see it looks perfect. I mean, it doesn't look any great just yet. But what I can do is I can start moving all the other characters around. So I can decide to move the U or the C closer to the U. And once you start working with this tool, you will notice that sometimes moving one character closer to another is easier than vice versa. So like here, once I move the U, I should select the C and move it even closer. That way I can create that interaction between them. And then I can select the O, I can drag that down. Once again, I can move the U closer and I can make the O bigger. Now, try not to stretch characters, so I'm going to just undo that. Always use the top right corner for resizing characters. And by the way, you can even slightly overlap sometimes characters, but that's also something I would recommend not to do. So it just makes it hard to read. It's not good to affect the legibility of your text. So it's a very funky and creative technique, but still you have to pay attention to not to mess up the legibility. That's like a must to make sure your text is legible. Now you can see I very quickly could create a little bit more playful and like wonky type here, and of course I can change the color easily selecting one of the characters. I can go to my fill color and I can change the color of it. That's quite simple and easy to do. But the best thing about this is that if I need to change anything, let's say if I want to just change the H to M, I know it doesn't make any sense, but if I change it, you see it maintains the rotation, the size, and the placement of that letter as well. So if I change it again to N, you can see it still stays there. So let's just put it back to H, and let me show you these two examples here. So if you're wondering, like, what is this useful for? Okay, I can see you guys are complaining that the screen is too large. Let me just make that a bit smaller. And then we will be able to see it better while I'm doing. As I said, I'm still testing these things out, so it should be smaller now. Hopefully I'm not covering up anything. So what I wanted to show you here is I can see some questions. I will be replying to these once I finish this example. So what I wanted to show you here is that this technique can be very useful if you want to do something what you see on the top. So the Grumpy Mule Coffee is a really cool brand. I love their logo. Is created exactly with this type of technique. And once again, you can do that individually putting characters down, but if you use the touch type tool, then everything is going to be non-destructive, so the text will stay editable, and that's what we want. And the same thing with the YouTube Kids. Once again, so we have that playful, completely messy setup, and that's again something. If I switch back to the touch type tool and I select one of my letters in here, you can see I could even move it beyond or be in front of one of the letters or above or below, so you are not really limited. You can't move it completely to the left of a character that was placed down in front, so you can only move it to a certain point, but it's still a really cool thing. So I definitely recommend to test this out. So all right, so let me just look at quickly my chat, and then we can move on to the next example. If you have any questions about this method, let me know as well. If you have also anything you're interested in, you can ask me. So yes, so it's the winning of the class I explained in the beginning. I'm going to mention techniques today, and at the end I am going to ask a question about these techniques, and whoever is fastest, I'm going to reward that person will get a prize, free access to one of my paid courses. And it is not just any course, it is my actual Illustrator CC masterclass, which is a massive course. It's around 12 hours long, and it's that's the edited course, so I'm not just talking about rubbish in it. It's a very streamlined course and 12 hours of pure content. So I'm going to come back to this soon. So let me just look at other questions. Joanna is asking, seems like an interesting question. If you change your mind about the text form, how do you revert quickly back to the original form? You are meaning to change the font, I guess. So, or maybe just the actual shape, like if you want to revert back and remove the touch type from it. It's a very interesting question. So if I want to remove the touch type from it, then one thing I can do, I don't think you can reset the touch type on this. That's a very interesting question. I haven't actually tried that, but it seems like you can't just reset the touch type. But good thing is always to double click on the tool you are using to get more options. Unfortunately, with touch type, you don't have any additional options. And then the next thing I would normally do is to check in the menus if there's anything there. I only found type orientation horizontal. If I set it to vertical and then I set it back to horizontal, let's see what happens. Again, it doesn't reset it. So probably the best thing to do is to keep the original version as a duplicate and then have a version with the touch type. So you still have the original form and the chaotic touch type version. All right. And yes, someone else asked whether you can create the, sorry, I can't spell your name, but you can have separate fonts for each of these letters, but that's actually can be done not even with the touch type tool. So you can have, I don't know, black letter for the T and so on and so forth. So that's just like a normal type editing feature, but it works with touch type as well. Cool. If you go back to the regular type tool and edit, it's not going to change the font and the alignment as well. You can still edit with that tool as well, but of course, the only way to make changes to the position and rotation is by using the touch type tool. So touch type tool is not actually to edit the font itself or the text. It is to edit the rotation, the scaling, and the position. All right, but I think we spent enough time on this because I have so much more to cover. So let me just move on to the next example, which is another very simple, and this will be really quick. I don't even want to spend too much time on this, but a lot of people think that text wrap is only available in InDesign. And InDesign does a really good job at text wrap. So whenever you want to have your body copy or a longer amount of text wrapped around something like an image or an object, InDesign is great because it has a separate panel as well where you can set up how you want the text wrap to work, but it's also available here in Illustrator. So if I select one of these objects, let's just say this one, and then I go to type, so you select the graphic, not the text, and then you go to the type menu. Actually, sorry, it's not type menu, it's object menu. So object, text wrap, make. So that's all we need to do. If I click on that, then we have this setup where if I click away, you can see exactly what happened, that the text is now wrapped around the object. So it's a very simple technique, but there's a couple of things you can do. Once you select the object again and you go back to the object menu, on the text wrap, you can find text wrap options. And if you click on that, then you can increase the offset. So if I set it, let's say, to 10 points, you can see it's increased. Let me just go back, make it even bigger. So text wrap options and increase it up to, let's say, 30 points. Then you see we have a much larger margin or offset from the object. Let me just undo this, Control Z, Command Z, undo, and then that's probably a bit healthier setup. Now, if I move the object to the other side of the text, it also works. And you just have to be careful not to trap words on some of the sides of your graphic when you use text wrap. So this is what I call trapped words here on the top right corner. That's something you should avoid. Cool. All right, so I can see someone, Ramon, you can reset touch type from the character window reset panel. Brilliant. Let's test that out. So that's the cool thing about these live streams that I also learn, not just you guys. So thank you so much for that. So if we go to character window, by the way, you can find that under the window menu, and you go into type character, or Control T, Command T is the shortcut to get this window up, or panel. It's panel is better way of calling it. And then we should have the reset panel option here. And there you go, well done. The only thing is that it doesn't go back to the way my font was set up. It goes back to the default font as well, and default font size in Illustrator, which is Myriad 12 points. It's still a great way of resetting the font. So that might deserve already a price. So I will come back to you, Ramon, for your solution for this. So thank you so much. So let's just move on and let's explore what we can do with Illustrator and text. So we've done touch type, we've done the wrap text around objects. Here's the next example, images within text. So place images inside text. Now, this is a very simple technique, and I wouldn't even waste time on this if I don't use this technique for so many other things. And the technique is called clipping mask. Now, if you use clipping mask, you probably are very familiar how to do this, but for those who have never used it before, I'm going to show you now. It's extremely simple technique. So you just place in an image, can be anything. It doesn't have to be linked, it can be embedded. You can go to File menu and then choose Place. Control Shift or Command Shift P is the shortcut. You select the image, place it in, done. And by the way, there is a feature in Illustrator CC that they recently introduced that finally, after many years of users asking and suggesting this feature, now we can crop images as well once you place them into Illustrator, so you don't have to do it before in Photoshop. You can select the crop image option up here, and then you can decide which part you want to use. So if I just want to use that part and I apply it, then now I crop this image within Illustrator. And if I go back to crop image, I can show you that it is actually almost like a destructive technique, so it literally removes the rest of the image. So you just have to be a little bit careful with that. But the clipping mask is actually similar to cropping, because what you do, but this is non-destructive, by the way, so you are not losing anything when you are using this technique. So when you are using clipping mask, you can show and hide certain areas of your selection, which in this case is this image. So if I use the type tool and I just type in elephant, so let's make it plural, so elephants, and then let's just choose something nice and bulky. It's always good to have a font that is strong, and I think this font is quite good for this method. The reason I'm using a more bulky font is because we will be able to see more within these words or characters. By the way, the name of this font is Heavitas, and I think it might be a Typekit font. I'm not 100% sure about that. No, it is not a Typekit. Typekit is a feature from Adobe Creative Cloud, but this is just something I downloaded from somewhere. It's a quite nice font, by the way. Let me just show you this technique, and then I will look at the questions you are asking right now. Keep asking questions, by the way. If I don't answer straight away, that doesn't mean I'm not interested to answer. So let me show you what you can do when you have your text ready. You select both the image behind the text, and it's important, remember, have your text on top of the image, because your text is going to be your clipping mask. So it has to be on top. So when you have when you have two of them selected, you can go up to the object menu and choose clipping mask make, or remember this shortcut, Command 7 or Control 7. That's the fast way of creating clipping masks. Once again, have two things selected at least, and whatever is on top, whatever is the top object is going to be used as the clipping mask. So once we see it, you see it is like a cookie cutter. That's the best analogy. The top element is the cookie cutter that cuts out from the paste, and then that's what we can see. Now the best thing about this method, it is completely non-destructive, so both your text is still editable and the image itself. So if I just show you this, I can edit my text. If I decide that I just want to type in Africa, I can do that, and immediately the clipping is activated once I change the text. So the text is editable. I can make it bigger as well. All right. But I can also select the image, and what I'm doing, notice here in the layers panel, I'm clicking on these circles to select the items within the clip group. The clip group is the one that was generated when we use this shortcut, Control 7 or Command 7. So once the clip group is created, within that you will have your image and text, and you can select each of them by clicking on the circles. So once the circle is selected, in this case on the image, I can use Shift up and down, right and left arrows to nudge the image around, or I can make it smaller. Always hold down the Shift key whenever you are resizing to make sure that you are not distorting text. So in this case, for example, I want to see the eyes of the elephants, so it might be worth playing around a bit until I see at least 1 or 2 elephants and their eyes. Otherwise, it's just a little bit weird. So maybe move it up there, and then we see 2 of them. So this is an interesting method and definitely worth remembering. So before I move on to the next example, let me just have a quick look at the chat. So if you have any questions you have right now, you can ask them and I should be able to answer. So let me just have a quick look. So I can see Shumi is answering a lot of the questions. Thank you so much. But if there's any other questions that wasn't answered yet. All right. There is a question: is there a smart object option for raster images in Illustrator? Now, you don't actually need a smart object in Illustrator, because what happens is whenever you place in an image, and let me just show this quickly to everyone. So if I select that image, copy paste it and put it just somewhere here, you see when you have an image, it's going to have a resolution up here. The PPI is the resolution, pixel per inch, and it's quite high at the moment. That usually anything beyond 300 PPI or above 300 PPI is perfect for print, or 300 is the standard that we use most of the time. So if I make this image bigger, holding down Alt and Shift and dragging a corner point can resize and keep the center of the image where it was originally. So if I increase the size of my image, immediately you can see that the PPI value is dropping. Now it's only 257. So the bigger I make my image, the smaller or the lower the resolution gets. And if I make it small again, then you guessed it, it's going to go up. So now the PPI or resolution is 610. So you don't actually need a smart object feature in Illustrator like you would in Photoshop to maintain the resolution and to work non-destructively, because Illustrator automatically handles images non-destructively. So it references the original file as long as you have still the file available, or as long as the image is embedded into your Illustrator file. So you don't need a smart object feature, but very good question. Thank you so much for asking. Let me go through the questions. All right. I think there's not much other questions. Nero is asking how to set opacity of an image. Well, just like you would do with everything else, you select it, and here in the options bar you have opacity, and then you can reduce it. So the same thing applies to almost everything in Illustrator. All right, let me move on to the next example, and just checking quickly the time, how much time we have left. So I'm planning to do an hour session, so we have 25 minutes left. So we have 3 more examples that I would like to go through. Now in this example, I'm going to show you actually 2 different techniques, but it's a very similar technique, so that's why I kept it in one file. On the left, we are going to learn how to use negative space with typography, and on the right, we are going to learn how to create outlines to join maybe 2 words together and create a word mark. So word marks we usually call logos, where it's mainly made up of text, and the only thing you really need for word marks usually is to have at least one creative touch, something unique, something that's not common, and that will give character to the whole word mark. So on the left side we can see this brand called Think, and they have a very cool negative space used on the N. So let me show you how I would do this normally in Illustrator. Best place to work on logos is definitely Illustrator out of all the Adobe applications. So I can see some people getting excited about negative space, me too. So when I create a duplicate of this. Let me just alt click and drag with the selection tool just to create a duplicate, just in case I need to go back. And I'm going to lock these two images, so I don't want to mess with them. Control or Command 2 is going to quickly lock things in Illustrator. That's also useful to remember. So if I want to have the same effect that you have there on the top, I would do the following. So first of all, there's so many different ways of doing this, but this is a fast and easy way. So first of all, I would use the type tool, click in front of the N, and then use Alt left arrow to nudge it until it gets close to the I. This is kerning, by the way, again. Alt left arrow on the right side as well. So completely close up the space between the N and the K. And notice that the reason why this negative space N works so well is because both the I and the K has a completely straight vertical edge, and the N as well. So all three characters end both on left and right sides with a completely vertical straight lines. That's very important. Otherwise, it wouldn't really work as well. But as long as you have a word where you notice that you have a letter that's like that, you can already apply this negative space technique. So once I have these alignment ready, I can now go to the object menu having the whole thing selected and either use the expand option or go to the type menu and choose create outlines. I like this way of doing it, and the shortcut I also use most of the time is Command Shift O or Control Shift O. Whenever you use this method, let me just click on it, you see what happens. You actually lose the editability of the text, so you won't be able to change the text anymore or work with the type tool on this. These became vector objects, so each character is a vector object. And if we look at our layers panel, you will see that it created a group from these characters. So there's my group. I just zoom a little bit closer, you can all see it. And I'm going to ungroup it, Command Shift or Control Shift G to ungroup, because I don't actually need it to be in a group right now. Later on I might put it back. So what I would do next is to select the rectangle tool and then draw a rectangle which is exactly the same size as the N, the character that we have there. So I draw that and then I select both of these together. So I made a selection highlighting both the rectangle and the N, and then guess what? We are going to use the shape builder tool. The tool that I used in the last live stream a few times, and this is something you can find in the toolbar here. I changed the shortcut to S. By default is Shift M to select it, and this should be available in previous versions of Illustrator as well. So what I'm going to do is to hold down the Alt key and click on the N, and that's all you need to do. How easy is that? Click and done. We have our negative space created. So negative space we call in design anything that's empty, but still it is a very important part of the design because that empty space can show details. Like here, it's actually a letter, although it's an empty space. So just to prove that to you, if I select all this and group it back together again, that's Command G or Control G, then if I move it onto a different background, like here on the gray background, you can see we see through this. So it's actually not white color, it's see-through, but our brain still allows us to read it. So it's an amazing thing, negative space. And if you want to check it out, in many logos you can find it. Just type in on Google negative space logo design. Plenty of examples and brilliant ways of using negative space. And just another example, a bit of theory. The reason why negative space is so important in design, because it's similar to anything else in general. Like music is a good metaphor or example. In music as well, if you just have sound constantly, it's just noise. But if you listen to music, there's always silence as well. And usually in pop music, there's like a point in the music where everything stops and then it starts again, and those are the most effective parts. So just after the silence, when the chorus or something comes back, or like usually everything plays full on, that's the most effective part, because it gives you the strongest contrast, and also it's just generally having silence and then having the sound. Same thing in design, emptiness and actual color or design elements next to each other form a very strong bond and unity. So yeah, I mean, classical music is the same. You have pauses and then music. So it's just think about that a bit. Think about that. All right, so let me go to our other example. Yeah, Gestalt is the theory. That's one part of the Gestalt theory. It's also something worth checking out. Thanks for pointing that out. So the next artboard that I have here has a very similar technique. I mean, I'm going to use a very similar technique, but still not for negative space. Instead of creating like a joint between two words, and it's not a ligature. Ligature is another term used in typography when you have two characters next to each other that can be joined to make it more legible. And some fonts, usually more advanced fonts, allow you to have ligatures, or even automatically will turn on ligatures. But this is not a ligature. This is something like a visual join between two letters, what you see on the top on Orange Hive. So I'm using a different font here, but it's going to work just as well. So first of all, let me just kern this because it really bugs me. So click between R and A, Alt, left and right arrows. I can adjust the kerning. Also here the E is too far. Let's just get it a bit closer. G as well, and I think that should be okay. Maybe the Hive as well, the V can have a little bit more space, something like that. I mean, you could kern a bit more, but I think that should be enough. And then I'm going to now select both of these, and then what's the shortcut of create outlines? Let's see if this is not the prize question yet, but let's see who's the fastest. What was create outlines shortcut? I have more than 100 people on the chat, so hopefully someone will give us the solution. I'm just going to wait a bit because there's a time difference, around 10 seconds delay between me and the chat. Control Shift is good, and one letter. It's the first letter of this word mark that I'm creating. Control Shift O. Yes, so Control Shift O. Once again, type create outlines is the one I'm using. Right there is the shortcut, remember that. So once you use this, once again, it's like expanding your type. You can't edit it anymore, but you have full control over how you can use each of the anchor points within these objects. So let me just ungroup them as well, Command Shift or Control Shift G, and then let's see what we can do here. If I zoom closer, I want to join the A and the V together. That's the task here. So what I'm going to do is to draw a line between these two. So I'm going to use, actually even better I think, if I select with the direct selection tool these bottom anchor points, just to show it to you, you can see I can move them around easily, and if my alignment is good, I could just simply move it and overlap it with the other letter there. But if the A is thicker than the V, in this case with this font, I can also decide to drag it even further down and overlap it even beyond that. Now I'm not going to adjust this too accurately, but I can go a little bit closer, and let me just move it slightly closer to it. There you go, that's quite close now. So I could always refine this further, but that gets us to essentially a joint word mark where we have the A and the V joint. And you can see, because we created outlines using the direct selection tool, I can select any point, like select these points here and start dragging them out, and make changes to it. So if I want the R to come down, I can also do that. And you can see like there's so much potential in this as well. You can start forming completely different ways of uniting your words, and I could maybe create the O much bigger than before, or any other methods. It's really up to your creativity after this point. Another thing that you can do, let's say if this brand is about let's say drawing, if this brand is about illustration, I could just use the pen tool and draw next to it a triangle sort of thing, something like that. And then using the eraser, holding down the Alt key, I can cut into this, and then we have a pencil. So the same thing I can do, holding down Alt key, and then just cut into this section once, and then another one, and then immediately we have even more of a pencil now. And this is all started from an actual text. So once I created outlines, I'm completely free to mess around with it. So I hope that again made sense, and I hope you enjoyed these two examples. Cool. So let me just quickly look at the chat, and I think we are good to go ahead. So the eraser tool, when I'm using it, I can use it in two different ways. Either use it as a brush, and that way you use the square brackets on the keyboard to resize it. So the square brackets, yeah, you can resize it. These are the ones. I'm just showing it on the screen. Yes, these two. So you can use those. And then if you want, you can also hold down the Alt or Option key, and that way whatever you erase will be erased by the block. It's like a selection, erased by selection, we can even call it. And important with the eraser tool is that if you don't have anything selected and you erase, it erases everything. If you have something selected, let's say the R in this case, and I use the eraser tool, I can just erase from that selected letter. Yeah, so you can limit your erased content by having something selected. All right, cool. All right, let me just move ahead because I can see there's no more questions, unanswered questions. Now comes our, well, sort of last example. I have 10 more minutes left, so this is the last complex example that I wanted to show you, working with type. And this I found because I have been teaching Illustrator for more than 10 years in classroom training and in online courses, in seminars and events. So I met a lot of people and I know what people have usually problem with. Now you might already know this one I'm going to show you, but from experience I know a lot of people has problem or trouble setting up something like this. So what I'm going to show you now is how to create a concentric logo where you have text on top and underneath a circle. So hopefully you will find this useful. I can see already some people getting excited. So let me show you first of all how this technique works. So when you use the type tool and you have a circle created already, that's first of all what you need to start with. You need to have a shape. Once you have your circle, you need to use the type tool, and I'm going to zoom closer so you can see what happens when I align my cursor on the edge of a shape. I get this cursor. Now this cursor, you can see it now. This cursor means that if I click now, it would turn this shape into like a bounding box or a holding device in which I can put my text. So I can put text inside the circle. That's useful as well. So it becomes essentially like a circular frame. But instead of this, what I like to use is to put text around the shape, and for that you have to again align your cursor on the edge and then hold down the Alt or Option key on the keyboard, and notice how the cursor changes immediately. So this is the cursor that we need. All right, it's a little bit difficult to see it, but if I Alt click on the edge anywhere, I immediately get some text added on the outline of that shape, and the shape itself doesn't disappear, it's just become invisible, but it's actually there, so I can always bring it back if I want to. But now that I have my text, I can always put what was that other example that I had, typography adventures. So I can always put here typography for now, and when I have text on the outline of this circle, I can of course increase the size of it, and I can use the shortcut we've learned before, Control or Command Shift full stop and comma to decrease the size of text. But how can I make sure this stays exactly centered on top of this circle? So the way I do that normally is by switching to the direct selection tool, and that is when you get the endpoints and the center point. Now these are the endpoints, and notice that I don't click on these empty white boxes, I click on these points here. So click on those lines to move the endpoint and start point around. This is the start point, this is the end point. So by default Illustrator gives you full access to the circle, and it starts or adds the start point exactly where you click on the circle with the Alt key and the Type tool, remember. So if I set my endpoint, let's say somewhere around here, or even better, set it at 3 o'clock. So at 3 o'clock, as imagine this is a clock, and then the start point you set on 9 o'clock. That way you know that you're using exactly half of the circle, the top half. And by the way, as long as you have smart guides on and you have the snap to point option on as well, you should get these points quickly and automatically coming up. So notice when I move this point around the end point, it turns purple, or gives me that purple or pink line, which means that it snaps to that exact point there. So it's still not in the center, but I have the center point in the center. That's the center point, by the way. And you could even move, sorry for zooming in and out, it might be a bit annoying, but when I drag that center point around, you can see I can turn the whole thing around on the circle. So that's quite useful. But the more important thing now is if I select my text, I can just set it to align center from the options bar. So when I click on that, now it jumps in the center, and then I know it's exactly in the center because I've set up the start and end points to cover exactly half of the circle, the top half. So now I could easily change the font as well if I want to use that same font that we used before. So let me just, we can use Helvetica as well, maybe in this time Helvetica bold, and then if I want to make it all capitals, all this, then I can go into the character panel and click on all caps like that. Now Helvetica is a font that I use so much that I'm actually bored of it a bit, so let me just stick to the font that we used today. And once again, when you use font on the outline, you can use steel kerning. So in this case, it's even more important probably because you have some of your characters too close to each other, like here the R and the A. So Alt left and right arrow is even more important in this case. So do your kerning. That's like a task or like a must for working with text to nicely balance out the characters. And then I can just see some questions coming up. There's actually quite a lot of questions, so let me just come back to this in a bit. What I'm going to show you now is how to put word underneath the circle. So I'm just going to move this circle here so we can see exactly what is happening. So we have our circle and we have this other object as well around it. I'm just going to make sure that they are aligned to each other like that. So If I want to have something similar to what I showed you earlier, where we have the text underneath, so Typography Adventures, that needs to be a separate text object. So you need to have another circle and another text object completely independent from the one on the top, because you can't have two different directions within the same object using type on a path. So notice that the typography is coming from left to right, or it's written left to right, and Adventures is also written left to right, but you have to think about clockwise and counterclockwise ways. So the text can only be written in one direction around the circle. So to work around our circle, I'm going to copy paste this, what I already created. So that's Control C, Control F, or Command C, Command F in Illustrator. And that way I have now a duplicate. I'll just show it to you. But what I'm going to do, actually, let me just move it to the side so you can see exactly what's happening. So once I have it on the side, I'm going to now use this center point, center line, remember the one we can grab, and with that I can move the text around on the circle. But what's more important, and this is the cool technique, you can drag it inside the circle. Now by default it doesn't look any good, but now my text is inside the circle. You can see that the direction can change. So having it placed down there or up there, it's sometimes a bit difficult to like find out what is happening until you actually give it enough space. So you can see I'm doing the same thing. 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock. In this case, the start point is on 9 o'clock. The end point is on 3 o'clock. And in between, I have the text, but now inside the circle. And when you have inside the circle, you will have the counterclockwise writing direction. When it's outside of the circle, then you will have the clockwise writing. So now if I change the text, I just double click on it and I type in Adventures. I can again do my kerning, Alt left and right arrows to kern this a bit, but before I actually go any further, I'm going to drag this over my previous creation, and I'm going to make sure it's aligned to the other text center point. And what you can notice now is because we used the same size circle and we have the text inside it, it's not actually aligned to that baseline, which in this case is a circular baseline. So if I want the adventure to align to that, all I have to do is hold down the Alt and Shift keys and start dragging the corner point out until I get to the same size. But I will have to make sure after that, so I'm just checking the baseline, let's just drag it a bit further out. Something like that I think will work. Yep, there you go. So the baseline of typography should be on the top of Adventures, and that's when you have exactly the same gap between the typography and the Adventures words. But because I resized the Adventures, I need to change the size of the font. So I just double click on it to select it. And by the way, let me select typography first. That was 40 point size. So I select the word Adventures and I change it to 40 points. So now it's aligned and I just have to double check. Yeah, I just need to adjust it slightly closer. There might be a faster way of doing this, but this is usually what I do. Actually, there's a faster way. Yeah, let me just show you this as well. So to make sure that I see what I'm doing, I'm going to create another circle and I'm going to align it also to the center point. And you can create guides from objects within Illustrator. So let me just create that circle in the size that we need. Even easier if we just use this one, just copy that and then extend it, make the size bigger. So that's the ideal baseline that we need, maybe slightly smaller, something like that. And if you go up to the view menu, you can go to guides and make guides, Control 5 or Command 5, which turns your current object into a guide. And that guide can be logged as well. So if I select that, I can press Command 2 or Control 2. Now it's logged, but now I can see and exactly tell where I need the text to be. So It's a little bit of going back and forth, but finally you can get to the same result. And then of course you can decide whatever you want to place inside in the circle. And it's actually exactly 1 hour now. So I was quite accurate with my timing. So this is all that I wanted to show you. Let me just show you all the examples we went through. If I go to the window menu and I choose arrange tile, we can see all the examples, and I'm just going to zoom out on each of them so we can see what we covered. So there we had our warp wrap text around objects, and then we also had our text or image inside text, and then we had our touch type in the beginning. So we covered quite a lot, I think, and hopefully you found these examples useful. In the last 5 minutes of this live stream, I am going to try to answer the questions raised in the live chat. But to make sure, don't leave yet, to make sure that you, for those who join me live, I reward your attention. I'm going to give away a few free courses. My online courses you can find access to through the link under this video. It's courses.yesimadesigner.com, and the giveaway of today is one of my most successful bestseller courses. It's called Illustrator CC Masterclass. It's a huge one. It's 12 plus hours, so it's a massive course, and whoever is going to be the lucky winner today will get free access to this. So it's around $100 on my site, but I'm giving away because you guys joined me on this live session. So how we choose the winner is very simple. I'm going to ask you a question about the techniques I mentioned today, and it's not a secret. It's going to be a keyboard shortcut. So be prepared for shortcuts that I mentioned. And the first, let's say the first 2 answers will be rewarded. Obviously, it's the first 2 from different people replying with the correct answer to my question will get the access to these courses. And whoever is the one that wins, I am going to privately message them their access to the course. So the question is, are you guys ready? Are you ready? So be fast, because unfortunately I can't give free access to everyone, but whoever is the fastest will get the reward. So the first 2 people. And the question is, what's the shortcut? What's the keyboard shortcut to create clipping masks in Illustrator? Let's see. There's a delay, so I might see it a little bit later than you write it. But the first 2 correct answers will be rewarded. And Command 5 is close. Control F is close. Control 7. Yes. Control 7. Yes. I see the 2 correct answers. So you can stop now. Sorry if you missed it. I already saw the first 2 users who had the correct answer. So they are Lady Vorfalak, I think, and Ronak Hossain. So congratulations, guys. You were really fast. And I can see a lot of correct answers came in afterwards. And a lot of you, many of you were really close. Command 5 is actually a very similar one, and I mentioned that today as well. Command 5, if you remember, did I mention that yes, it was just recently I mentioned that was the create guide from an object, which is very similar to a clipping mask. I understand that you might got confused on that. So well done for remembering that. Now you can remember. This should help you to remember that what's the difference between the 2. So Control 5, Control 7, and Command 5, Command 7. But we have our winners. So thank you so much for participating in this little contest. If you like this, did you guys like this? I mean, did you want to have these type of contests in the future? If you like it, then I will keep doing this in my next live streams. So once again, congratulations for those who won, and don't feel sad if you haven't win access to these courses. You can actually get free trial access if you sign up on my courses website. And that's all for today. I would like to just also mention that I really appreciate if you guys consider checking out my Patreon website. You can find it very easily. It's patreon.com/yesimAdesigner, or you can find the link again under the video. Patreon is something that you can use to help me out producing these live streams and also tutorials for YouTube, because essentially these are all free. So to help me out, it takes quite a long time to prepare and to do these courses and live streams. Tutorials and live streams. So I appreciate any help. If you want to be my sponsor or patron, then check out that website. And I'm actually releasing all the exercises that I used in this live stream and all in the future live streams as downloadable files if you are a patron. So if you are on Patreon and if you are supporting me, then you will get access to all of these files that I used. And you get also a lot of other goodies depending on how you support me. So thanks a lot for your attention. And again, if you haven't subscribed to me on YouTube yet, then this is probably the best time to do it. And thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you can join me next time as well. I'm going to try to do the same time next week on Sunday. I might have another one during the week. I don't have a set time yet, but I'm going to try to stick to this time on Sunday, as long as it was ideal for most of you. I know in Asia it is probably too late. For those who joined me from Asia, well done, and it's probably time to go to bed now. And for those from the States, hopefully it was not too early. From people in Europe, hopefully it was a good time. And let me know if you have any suggestions what time would be best. That's also appreciated. But of course, the whole thing is recorded, so you will be able to access this on YouTube, on my channel. The whole thing you can watch again. And once again, thanks a lot, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.